all slightly preferred what they got out of this system than the pre-existing system, but they were frustrated about the fact that it was a black box. And so even though they slightly preferred what they got, they didn't like the system better overall. It's probably somewhat of a net gain over the auctions that people have used in the past. But the benefit of the auction is people have sort of a sense of like how they're getting the stuff or not getting it. And they feel they can express whatever relative preferences they want and so forth. Whereas here, they're like being really constrained in terms of what they can express to the system, and they're being allocated something through this black box. Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
For really small markets,
yeah.
Where people have really different preferences, is it possible that there's just no way to set up the market to create price?
With small numbers of people, what would you do?
We tried this with roommates to figure out rent prices. We just started with all the rent prices being the same.
Yeah.
And then people would be allowed to switch, and we'd increase 1 by 10 and decrease 1 by 10. Like if I chose to switch and you went in a circle, and people kept switching until everyone was content. The problem was, well, it just didn't work because we had 4 singles and 1 double.
Yeah.
And 2 of the singles had their own bathroom, and so there were basically 3 classes of people.
Yeah.
Two guys each. And there were 6 people bidding, but
yeah.
no one wanted anyone else's room. It was retarded, right? But
yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Is there any way to actually set up a market to win in that situation?
Well, I mean, as we said, with a very small number of people, it's not guaranteed that there's an equilibrium, right? I mean, I'll tell you the way to find the equilibrium if it does exist, but there may not be an equilibrium with a very small number of people. So, and in fact, also people would, if they don't necessarily want to act truthfully at any given price, right? Because they might want to reduce their demand to try to get down their rent. And that might lead the inefficient person to be allocated the thing. So then you get into these market power type problems, right? Which we'll talk about for the rest of the course, basically.
Sure. So what would the solution be then?
Well, a lot of people would say just try doing a market thing and let people exert their market power and try using this Newton's method thing that I'll talk about. And people will exert market power. It won't be efficient, but at least you'll get something. Another thing you can do is you can hold some sort of a VCG type auction, which is not as problematic when there's a small number of people in competition with each other. So, but then the problem is you raise some revenue off of that, and if you distribute that back to people, it'll change their incentives, but maybe that's, you're always going to have some incentive problem in a small market. So the question is which incentive problem you want to have. So all those would seem to me to be reasonable ways of doing it. But you have to do a VCG auction rather than a normal auction because there's like complementarities and so forth. And yeah, but OK. So here's what the data looks like. It's not too optimistic for Budish's thing. So this is the percent of people who liked better what they got out of the system than what they got out of the old system. It's not too great. I mean, it's certainly not a ringing endorsement. Yeah, Mohammed.
So one problem that people may have with this,
yeah.
although like on average people may be improved, but like people just get like 5 courses together, and
yeah.
maybe when they look at that list, that's not their preferred combination. But if we do this mechanism and then let people like trade courses for a week, like for example, I can put this course and like I can exchange this course with these 3 courses, anyone one, and everybody put this.
Yeah, but the problem, again, Mohammed, it's the same exact thing you were saying before, is that like now you're getting away from the simplicity of the mechanism, that the mechanism just optimizes it. I mean, in principle, you shouldn't have to do that. The whole point is this is a market. It's supposed to exploit all the gains from trade, and yet it doesn't because it's not allowing people to express the richness of their preferences. You see what I mean? And as soon as we start going down your road, we're getting away from the whole concept of the mechanism, which was that you just put it into the computer and you let the computer optimize. Now, I'm going to talk in just 1 second about a more decentralized system, which would actually allow people to make their own trades as they want to do it. And we'll talk about the downsides of that relative to this system. But go ahead, Chrissy.
Well, the paper did mention that there are forms of like auto-correction where, so maybe people sign up for more classes than they need to, which is like exactly what we've been doing. And you can add and drop for like a week or so.
Yeah.
And so at that point, you would maybe over-allocate classes
Yeah. No.
The expectation that people would drop like 2 of their classes.
So to the extent that people are learning something about the classes over time, that's inevitable.
Right.
But to the extent that it's really just that the system made a mistake, and now we've got to have some extra system way of that's a failure of the system. I mean, it's like, yeah, but I mean, any system we have, you can always improve on it by going away from the system, maybe. But if the system is supposed to be efficient, I mean, a real market is supposed to be efficient. It's supposed to exploit exactly all the gains from trade. So, you know, the advantage of the Warden system, I think, is that it's relatively easy to use. The disadvantage of going into something like you're talking about is people have to spend a bunch of time figuring out who to trade with and and we'll talk about those disadvantages in a second. The disadvantage is that it restricts people's preference reports. They can't say, this is not the type of schedule I want. I want a schedule that's balanced in the following types of ways. They have this just numbers on each of the courses, and it's this very stilted language that might not really have anything to do with the way that actual heterogeneity of people's preferences works in the real world, right? So the question is, how could we allow more rich, transparent procedure compared to this one? Well, one thing is that we could allow people to actually participate in a market, right? And this would require holding some sort of an auction, right? So from before, we know that some simultaneous sealed bid auction is not going to make a lot of sense because people don't know where prices are, and that creates a whole mess, right? So we need to give people more information about where prices are. So an alternative would be to have some sort of an open format. Is Tomas here? No? So does anyone else have a thought about what sort of open format we could use?
Well,
yeah.
I was thinking like what Neil was saying. Couldn't you like iterate multiple times, and if there's over demand, then increase the price, and if there's not enough demand, to decrease the price?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So if we can announce prices for each course, we could let people choose whatever bundle they want at the current prices, raise prices if there's excess demand, lower prices if there's excess supply. This is called a tâtonnement process and may have been something that you guys learned about. There are a couple of problems with it. One is whether this process ever ends, right? A second problem is, does it end in a reasonable amount of time? Eric?
Wait, so
Yeah.
is it like you announce the prices, everyone bids or whatever?
Everyone chooses what they want to buy at those prices.
Right, and then you raise the prices, and then you have them choose what they want to buy again?
Exactly.
Oh.
You have a bunch of rounds of, here's the prices, what do you want to buy? Here's the prices, what do you want to buy? And then once it's supply equals demand, you're locked into whatever you said.
Is this manipulatable? Like, can someone just over-demand a course?
So if there's a large number of people, no. Because your effect on the prices is not going to be very large. And so you might as well, in case the system ends next round.
So you have to make it so that people don't know when the system is going to end.
Yeah. Well, I mean, its system ends whenever demand equals supply, and that could happen at any moment, right? That's the idea. OK. So it turns out that this system doesn't necessarily need to converge. So the stability properties that we talked about last class, if something's globally stable, it will converge. But income effects can be large in a system like this, unlike in many of the markets we were talking about, because you just have this one set of fake currency, right? And there's only 7 things you're buying. So the change in prices of any of them could cause really big income effects, right? Now, Steve Smale had a really interesting insight to try to solve this problem. He realized that the speed of something converging and whether it converges at all are basically the same problem. So let's think just about the speed problem to start, and then we'll talk about the broader problem of whether things converge at all. So imagine you had just one market, right? And you wanted to get that market to clear, right? Imagine that you start at a price of 10, and there's currently an excess demand of 20 units. And now you raise the price to 11, and now there's an excess supply of 100 units. What would you say? You would say, holy shit, this demand is just going all over the place. I better slow down my process of changing prices, right? So you would raise it back up, but rather than going by like a whole unit of price, you would try to go to like maybe 51 cents and try moving around the cents and seeing if you could get it to converge, right? This is sort of like what happens when you're in the shower in like a new hotel, right? You go in and you like turn it to hot, and then you're like, oh God, it's really burning. So I'm going to just turn it back. I'm going to dial it back just a little bit. Oh, okay, now it's right. And now, oh no, it overshot. Okay, I've got to do it even more finely, right? On the other hand, what if you had an excess demand of 19 when you charged a price of 11? Andre's not here, but does anyone else want to say what that would tell you to do?
Just have increase the units, like just do like 2 or 3 next time.
Yeah. So at that point, it would be like the opposite. It would be like one of those showers where, like, no matter how much you turn the thing, it never gets warm. So then you just know you've got to turn it way, way around, right? So the moral is that the rate at which you change the price should be decreasing in the excess demand, but it should be increasing in how slow it is, right? The slower it is, the faster you should be changing the prices, because that's going to get you to converge in a reasonable amount of time, right? Now, this is even more crucial with many markets, because the problem with many markets is it's like a Rubik's Cube. You've got to get all the markets to clear at the same time, right? And to do that, you need to make sure that they're all like getting to the point of clearing at the same speed. Because if you don't do that, what you could do is you could clear one market, but then in the process of trying to clear the other market, this one could come undone. And you could have this whole problem. So the speed problem when there are multiple markets becomes a convergence at all problem when there are multiple markets, right? And so what you need to do is do a multidimensional generalization of exactly this process. You should look, when I change the price in one market, how does that affect all the other markets' demands, right? You should form a matrix of that, and then you do the inverse of that, and you multiply that by however much excess demand there is at any given moment. And that is the analog of the process here, to make sure that everything sort of converges together at the same time. So what is Zianis here? He's never here, is he? Zianis Propenko? No. The name for this is Newton's method, right? This is exactly Newton's method that you learned, right? You've got a curve, you look at its slope, and you go down inversely proportional to the slope, right? And this sounds like something really abstract. It sounds like some sort of mathematical idea, but really it's just this completely common sense thing that of course you would do anytime you were running a market or adjusting the shower or anything else. You look at how sensitive the adjustments are, and you adjust and you take that into account. And in a multidimensional market, to get the market to clear, you just have to do exactly that. Now, so what we could do as an alternative to having this computer run this this thing and have people report is just throw people out there and have Newton's method run. So we could have everyone demand their thing, use Newton's method to adjust things. The computer could calculate how quickly demand is doing, easily do this inversion, and just keep adjusting, and the thing would converge after a while, right? And in fact, another question is, why do we need a formal procedure at all? Why can't we just have individuals figure this out themselves? We could just allocate courses to a bunch of people and have them figure out that they should do Newton's method, right? Wouldn't they figure out that that was the best way to adjust things? Or we could even go further. Maybe you don't think individuals could figure out Newton's method. Why don't we give all courses to a few individuals and then tell those individuals that they should get as much of the tokens as they possibly can so they can cash out. Now those people are going to know that the most efficient auction for them to